In one particular night in March 1919, missionaries Jim and Elizabeth Howard were waking up with a sudden urgency to pray at 3 a.m. They couldn't explain the source of this sudden urgency, and it was something they had never felt before. However, 2 days later, it will become plain to them the source of the sudden urgency to pray and why exactly at 3 a.m. Not every hour of the clock bears the same significance. Some are more important than others, and 3 a.m. is one of them. Today, I'm going to recount one faith-based mystery story that confirms the power of 3 a.m. And at the end of this video, I'm going to prove to you from science and even from scripture that 3 a.m. is not a normal hour in the day. Inspired by John Patton, a missionary who had spent his life evangelizing to the people of the New Hebrides in the South Pacific, Jim Howard and Elizabeth Howard left the home country of Australia and arrived in Asia near the border of the modern-day Papua New Guinea. Jim was a trained physician and Elizabeth was a trained teacher. They arrived in Papua New Guinea with the sole purpose of preaching and spreading the gospel and opening an evangelism center in Papua New Guinea. However, in a bid to draw the communities closer to God and into the missionary work, they decided that it would be better also to open a school there and also have a health center in this region of Papua New Guinea. So everything will go on as planned, and they will arrive in Papua New Guinea in early 1901. Now this region was really huge, and they were surrounded by huge and dense tropical forests on every side. But they decided that, you know what, God's work is not easy, so let's just start settling here and let's get into work. After settling and building their house, they started the work of evangelizing. It was a tough work because in this region, people were really that responding to the message of the gospel. They decided not to give up, and for the span of the next 18 years, they would only convert probably about 3 families in this region of Papua New Guinea. Even through the schools and the health, which were literally loved by the locals, they still had some problems in converting the locals to join the cause of God. One of such families is a family of a young man named Michael. This family was converted in a period between 1912 and 1913. Michael will then get into school, and then he will get into the service of Jim and Elizabeth Howard, helping them with the missionary cause that they had around this region of Papua New Guinea, and also acting as their translator going forward. Michael was 18 years old when he got into the service of Jim and Elizabeth Howard. Everything will go on a bit smoothly, though the work progressed rather slowly, but apart from that, everything was great until in mid-1918, when a tribal war broke up in this region of Papua New Guinea. Inter-tribes were fighting each other, and tribal raids became a common phenomenon. This thing really affected the missionary work. The elders of this region became concerned about this particular turn of events, and they decided to hold a consultative meeting in order to perform a ritual cleansing that they could appease their gods for having annoyed them, that brought upon them these calamities of tribal raids and tribal wars. So after the consultative meeting, the elders called for a community gathering, and Michael would attend this particular community gathering. But since then, things will start getting a bit strange. Michael, who was much more charismatic and extroverted guy, became much more reserved and introverted. This sudden change of behavior in Michael became very concerning to the Howards, but they decided to give it time. But what they didn't know is that this particular change in personality and behavior had a very specific reason for it, which was actually revolving around them. On this particular day, in March 1919, Jim and Elizabeth didn't head out to evangelize. Instead, they decided to do the work that they had started. So Jim headed off to the clinic, while Elizabeth headed to the school, where they would do their respective works until evening, when they would get back home and gather for the evening prayers. Everything will go rather normally throughout the day, even though the attendance in the clinic and in the school was much lower than normal days. In fact, Jim would later write in his diary that on this particular day, unlike in any other day before, he received no patient in his clinic. So after the day was ended, They all went back home and they met there, counted each of the day's experiences. And after the evening meal and after saying the evening prayers, Jim and Elizabeth Howard got into bed to rest. This particular region had no electricity, no police station, no communication with the outside world. The house in which they lived was a wooden house that sat on a ridge overlooking this huge tropical forest. And beyond the forest was the village settlements that were scattered in the plains below. However, before going to bed, Elizabeth would report feeling uneasy, and after prayer and minding that nothing strange happened on this particular evening, Elizabeth will get to sleep. The night was quiet, and the hypnotic sound of crickets and the wild animals far away brought some sense of peace, knowing that God was still in charge. And at 3 a.m. on this particular night, things would get much more strange. Jim would suddenly wake up and sit on his bed alert at 3 a.m. Jim was not used to waking up at these particular hours. He was used to waking up at 6 a.m. in the morning. But at 3 a.m. on this day, he would suddenly wake up with having no clear explanation why he woke up this suddenly. His heart was racing fast and hard, and he didn't really have any explanations for this. So he woke up. His wife was sleeping beside him and told him that he is feeling this urgent need of praying. So together they will kneel beside the bedside and they will pray. They will pray until the feeling will abate. And when they looked at their clocks, it was 4:15 a.m. So they had been praying for around 1 hour, 15 minutes. Jim didn't really feel the need to go outside, and after the prayer, they got into bed and passed away the hours of the morning till sunrise, when they got up and got out of bed. When they got out of the house that particular morning, there was nothing strange outside the house that could have necessitated the sudden waking up at 3 a.m. to pray for protection, as Jim would later state in his diary. But when they got up and walked down past the village to their clinic and even to the school, something strange was happening in the local community around. As Jim would later report, this particular community and the people around started regarding them with rather strange demeanor. They would look at them. Some would even not want to greet them, and these are people who had greeted them for days. Some would see them on the road and disappear. So they really didn't have any explanation for this strange occurrence among the villagers. But 2 days later, they got an explanation why. As for Michael, he will not attend to them for the next 2 days. And when he arrived by the third day, he still had this introverted, this reserved demeanor. So Jim really thought that this is strange. Let me call this young man and ask him what is his cause in the sudden change of behavior. And that is when Michael decided to narrate them the events surrounding even the feeling of the urgency to wake up at 3 a.m. on this particular night in March. It turned out that the consultative meeting and the rituals that the elders held in order to abate these calamities and tragedies befalling these particular villages had come up to one conclusion: that their troubles and calamities had been brought upon themselves by these particular missionaries. And so the resolution had come that on this particular night, they will burn down the settlement of the missionaries and kill them. So, armed with machetes and other crude weapons, young men from this village decided to progress towards Jim and Elizabeth's house in order to commit this heinous act. They arrived at the edge of the forest some few minutes before 3 a.m. and they started progressing towards the settlement of the missionaries Jim and Elizabeth. As they were progressing, they thought, because at that time the moonlight was still on, they thought they could see some figures outside the settlement of Jim, and they probably thought that some of their fellows had progressed early enough and had arrived at the scene before them. And so they continued approaching, but as they were approaching, they suddenly froze. It turned out that these figures that were surrounding this particular settlement and house of Jim weren't actually human. As one of the eyewitnesses later testified, is that these were extremely tall, rather 7 feet tall beings, very tall. And as they approached, This being suddenly turned and looked at them. And as the description goes, this particular beings had some type of glowing eyes, and they had these types of machetes that were rather long. So frankly afraid, the men turned and fled from the house and from the region. And this would explain the strange urgency to pray at 3 a.m. on this particular day. And not only that, later it will explain why the villagers were regarding them with such strange demeanor. Later, reading writings from Charles Spurgeon, Jim will discover that 3 a.m. wasn't actually a normal time. And that's why from then, he decided to change his routine to pray at exactly 3 a.m., between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m., having been convinced from scripture and also from readings from other preachers. 3 a.m. is not your ordinary hour. In fact, according to science, this hour has a special significance. According to some hospice nurses, most people tend to die at between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. And so this particular hour is nicknamed the letting go hour. Why? Because the circadian cycle, which is the body's normal clock, tends to be lowest at energy in these particular hours. It is at 3 a.m. when the breathing rates are slowest, the temperature is lowest, and even the blood pressure is very low. And according to spirituality, they also have their own ideas and theories about 3 a.m. According to them, 3 a.m. is when the veil between the spiritual and the physical dimensions is thinnest, making it easy to get into the spiritual dimension and to communicate with spiritual beings. And according to scripture, 3 a.m. is also a very significant hour. Known as the fourth watch, 3 a.m. is stated actually in the Bible. In Matthew chapter 14, Jesus had just finished preaching. This particular day had been phenomenal. He had performed the miracle of feeding over 5,000 people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. So after the day was ended and exhausted, he decided to go up into the mountain to pray. But before he did that, he sent the multitudes away and also the disciples. He told them to get into the boat and proceed to the other side of the sea where he will meet him. So the disciples get into the boat and they proceed to the other side of the sea, while Jesus himself goes up the mountain to pray. Now, while the disciples are in the sea, things don't go quite well. The Bible states that the sea became rough and the boat was tossed about. And in this Matthew chapter 14, verse 25, the Bible states that, and in the fourth watch, Jesus came unto them walking on water. Now, the fourth watch, according to the Romans, is between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. The Romans divided the time of the day or of the night into 4 watches. The first watch between 6 p.m. and 3 p.m., the second watch between 3 p.m. and midnight, the third watch between midnight and 3 a.m., and the fourth watch between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. rather. Therefore, it is in the fourth watch that Jesus approached them, and not approached them in just a normal way, but walking on water. Now, this is very significant because it means that at 3 a.m., then this is the particular time when prayers are much more heard and help is much more sent. It doesn't mean that you should not pray at other times. It simply means that at 3 a.m., you should not neglect prayer at such times.